It's now been over a week since Splatoon 3 had launched on the Nintendo Switch, and a lot of people are probably now finishing up the main campaign of the game. So today I wanted to talk about the ending of that campaign and talk about what exactly happened at the end of the story and try to explain some of the story details for you guys today. Within this series, I also like to explain what I thought about the ending and whether I thought it was a great conclusion or one that really didn't stand the test of time. So if you're excited to hear about the ending of the Splatoon 3 story mode, leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Splatoon 3 and Nintendo in general. Now let's get on to the video. I'm not going to explain the entire story because that might be for a separate video as we talk about the lore, but it pretty much starts off the same way it always does. The Octarians apparently took the Great Zapfish, and it's your job to get it back with Captain Cuttlefish. And then you find out, nope, they actually didn't. In fact, something's actually taking all the Octarians, corrupting them in this fuzzy ooze, and then eventually you split up with Captain Cuttlefish and have to find your way to him using the help of the old Agent 3 and Callie and Marie to go throughout the underground facility of Alterna in order to find out where Captain Cuttlefish actually went. But along your journey trying to find Captain Cuttlefish, you'll come across the Deep Cut Trio with Big Man, Fry, and Shiver, and they are trying to stop you from collecting treasures, which is really not your goal right here. But they want all the treasure in this underground facility to themselves, so you're kind of in their way and you have to fight through all three of them in order to obtain these three treasures, which you don't even know what to do with at the time. And that's pretty much a quick story summary of what goes on. You go from island to island, trying to find Captain Cuttlefish, getting these weird treasures, and using the power of Small Fry and the power eggs in order to consume all the weird fuzzy ooze on the island. Around the middle of our journey, we find out who the main villain of this whole story is and the person that even kidnapped Captain Cuttlefish in the first place. And yep, it's Mr. Grizz from Grizz Co. Industries. If you don't know who Grizz Co. is at this point, it's because you probably haven't played some side modes of Splatoon, including the one called Salmon Run. This was never a part of the main story, which makes it even more interesting. Salmon Run puts you and 3 other Inklings or Octolings on a little island in order to take out all of these things called Salmonid, which are these creepy fish that run at you with frying pans and other types of weird weapons. In this mode, you're hired by Mr. Grizz to go out on these islands and collect the various different fish eggs and different Salmonid eggs in order to take them back to base, and you never really knew why. What was the purpose and why were you doing this for Mr. Grizz? I mean, we know that bears love salmon, but we just thought it was because of that. Mr. Grizz had more than just his next meal on his agenda. He actually wanted to do something a lot more massive, and we'll get to that in a second, but Mr. Grizz had to take out one thing that was in his way, which was the legendary leader of the Squid Beak Splatoon, Captain Cuttlefish. But the only way to get to him is through the rocket area part of Alterna, and the only way to get over there is to get rid of the giant fuzzy ooze that's surrounding the area. And of course, we can use these 3 random objects to make some type of hedge clippers or lawnmower device, and the old Agent 3 actually uses it to cut down all of the fuzzy ooze, allowing our new Agent 3 to get across. I don't know why there's so many Agent 3s now. Hopefully they don't continue this trend. The old Agent 3 uses it as if he's using a special in the game, and this would be one crazy special, that's for sure. He's even glowing like he's using one of the specials in the multiplayer, but he uses it in order to chop down every single last bit of the ooze, and he actually hurts himself in the process, whether he sprained a tentacle or whatever happened. Yeah, he's not feeling good. Deep Cut then realizes that we don't want the treasure, we just need the objects in order to get to Captain Cuttlefish, and they're like surprised that we're not here to take their treasure, and they end up helping us towards the end of the game. And now it's time to make our way all the way to the top of the rocket, and we go through a very similar segment to the end of the Octo expansion as we were making our way all the way back to above ground. We're now making our way all the way to the top of the rocket, and we get to see warning signs going on all around the outside of the building. Yep, it's a very stressful situation, and the entire time we get to see funny conversations and serious ones going back and forth between Captain Cuttlefish and Mr. Grizz. The first part of the spaceport is really just some offices and different buildings that kind of do the technical side of the rocket launches, so you get to run through different buildings and various pipings and structures at the very bottom, which is pretty cool. The second area is the spaceport hangar where all the rockets are probably held and stored, and all the other stuff that's stored in this giant facility. You'll be using various specials to make your way out with a giant gaping hole at the bottom where the rocket probably is stored, so don't fall down there. The third area takes us to the Space Center lift, which puts us on a very small moving elevator that slowly takes us down to the base of the rocket. The fourth area is a final ascent up a giant tower to make your way to the rocket itself and come face to face with the main villain of this game. You can even see the captured great Zapfish in some type of incubator that's actually being one of the units powering this rocket in the first place, and that's the reason Mr. Grizz needed it. But right before you get to the top, the launch doors start to close because the rocket is getting ready to take off. So you have to open these launch doors by collecting energy cores that were actually present in the Octo expansion at the end as well, in order to power up the switches in the room to open the blast doors. They then make their way to the rocket just in time before launch, but to find Captain Cuttlefish completely drained of ink and life as he lays lifeless on the ground. Now this is actually what happens when squids die. They actually lose their color and go to an all pale white, and there's even videos online how to humanely kill a squid by just chopping it right above the eyes, which is really weird. You give it a little chop and they die instantly and the color drains from them. So it looks like Mr. Grizz may have gave Gramps a good old chop. But we hear the rocket door open and out comes the main antagonist, Mr. Grizz, the leader of Grizzco. Mr. Grizz's one intention is to bring back mammal life on the Earth by using his fuzzy ooze in order to turn regular squids and other marine life into mammals, which is kind of scary. Looking at the EXE Alterna logs, we can find out what happened to Mr. Grizz and how he even got here in the first place. Some of the last surviving members of the human race were able to blast away at the right time in order to look for a new planet, but thanks to a meteor shower, they took a lot of damage and lost a lot of fuel, so they had no choice but to return to Earth, but the fuel ran short just in time, not allowing them to return and allowing the ship to drift in space for over 10,000 years. Most of the crew perished, and in fact the only thing to survive was bear number 3, an internal subject, which tells me that there were 2 other bears, maybe even more on that same rocket, and maybe some of them are still alive and walking around the Earth looking for Mr. Grizz as well. But Mr. Grizz was able to survive somehow in space all that time by hibernating, and eventually woke up and found that the rocket has crash landed back on Earth and found nothing but sea life. There were no mammals to be found. During this long slumber, Mr. Grizz was able to dream and think about a plot as to what to do when he awoken, and he also used pieces of the Arc Polaris in order to figure out where to go next, and found the underground terminal of Alterna and noticed some crystallized liquid spread all over the walls. Now, it's not really noted what this liquid was, and if maybe it was just something that the scientists were working on at the time, but it was left in disaster all over the area. Mr. Grizz noticed when its own fur came in contact with the mysterious ooze, it could turn any creature into a fuzzy ooze mammal, which was kind of creepy. And with this new finding in mind, he stored the last remaining rocket deep below Alterna full of this ooze. In order to continue creating the fuzzy ooze, he needed one special ingredient. Yep, that's golden eggs from salmonid. Him doing it all alone would take way too long, so he started his own business, being the Grizzco Corporation. He would hire other marine life such as inklings and octolings in order to do his dirty work for him and pay them handsomely. This also explains why Mr. Grizz would often say things like, "Don't get hurt on company property, there's nothing I can do for you," and really not even care for the well-being of the inklings and octolings. He's just there as a mean boss in order for him to get paid for him to do his grand master plan. He would also need a collection of power eggs to help fuel the rocket even more once he's up in space. Mr. Grizz, now having everything he needs, takes course for space, jumps on the rocket and blasts all the way through the dome of Alterna. Meanwhile, the old Agent 3 is shedding a tear and crying over Captain Cuttlefish, and the one tear was able to revive Captain Cuttlefish. Kind of. We don't know if he's forever in this state, or maybe just temporarily, but somehow it was able to revive him, which normally it wouldn't happen. But I guess he was just dehydrated and needed some liquid. Maybe Mr. Grizz squeezed all the ink and liquid out of him. Wait, don't inklings and octolings die if they touch water? What is happening? Now the 3 members of Deep Cut come up to the top in order to help your Agent 3 reach the rocket in space. Fry uses her weird eels in order to create a chain that reaches all the way up to the sky and spins them around as a giant ink tornado. Shiver uses her shark apprentice, Master Mega, in order to make his way up the tornado as a rideable vehicle for the Inkling. Big Man supplies a space helmet. Agent 3 then makes his way up the tornado and blasts into space with a super launch. And little buddy kind of just follows and flies up there somehow. Not really quite sure how that happened. Agent 3 now makes his way into space and perfectly lands on the rocket. Mr. Grizz is prepping his way to cover the Earth in the fuzzy goos, but now it's a 1v1 battle against Mr. Grizz and a brand new Agent 3. You can also take a second to look at the Earth and just see how much the water has taken over. Now, most of the terrain is back to normal after the high tide and the floods so many years ago, but it's quite interesting. During this battle, you get to actually hear the Grizzco theme song playing in an ominous way, and it's actually very creepy and interesting at the same time. Making your way towards Mr. Grizz on the other side of the rocket, you get to use Little Buddy in order to pop the weird goose pimples that's on his stomach. In order to do this time around, you have to use the various different golden eggs on the outside of the rocket in order to power up Little Buddy instead of power eggs this time. I guess in space and with this extra goop, you need a little bit more power than just a power egg. One of my favorite attacks during the entire battle is when Mr. Grizz just curls up into a ball and starts rolling around the rocket in order to spin it in space, and it puts you in a little bit of a maze in order to roll around the goop, but it's just funny seeing him roll around. It's actually hilarious. Mr. Grizz then eventually loses his cool and detonates the rocket by just completely smashing it, letting loose all the fuzzy ooze and collecting it all for himself to power himself up to a mega size. DJ Octavio swoops in to save Agent 3 and has a brand new vehicle that we are able to drive and pilot. Squid Sisters and Deep Cut join together, and of course DJ Octavio to play the theme that we all know was going to happen, the Calamari Incantation, the third version this time around. Now, for some reason, Small Fry starts to gain energy from space, and it's said that it is marine life energy. I'm not really sure where this comes from. I think there's actually ancient lore saying that there are technically space dolphins and stuff, and I don't know, some type of ancient text and different stuff within real life, and maybe they kind of tied it into the lore here. Shiver and Fry also state lines from some type of ancient prophecy that actually foretold that this would happen, turning Small Fry into Huge Fry. Now we get a 1v1 of Mr. Grizz and Huge Fry, but we also get to help in our own way. DJ Octavio has a giant vacuum attached to his spaceship, so we get to go all Luigi's Mansion and kind of clean off some of the fuzzy ooze from Mr. Grizz to help out Huge Fry. We only have 3 minutes to make our way to Mr. Grizz and stop all this goop from forming on his body so that way he doesn't cover the earth in this fuzzy goo. We get to maneuver through meteorites, fight fuzzy Octarians, and eventually wipe the goo off of Mr. Grizz's butt cheek. And finally, for a finishing blow, we get to use a mega laser at the top of Octavio's ship in order to blast Mr. Grizz in the chest and blast him for good. Mr. Grizz, very upset, admits his defeat, and also admits that times have changed, the world can never be as it was. There can never be mammals again. It's actually kind of sad, and I feel for the guy, but then he says you will not receive severance pay, so forget you. With that, the spaceship explodes in a grand explosion with ink everywhere, completely devastating Mr. Grizz. It's safe to say that he's not alive. Well, maybe, you know Nintendo. Maybe there's a way he survived that somehow, maybe some of his leftover goos helped him, but who knows? Huge Fry returns back to Small Fry and the whole gang make their way back to Earth. Great Zapfish has finally returned, which makes me wonder how many of these things are there, because this is the third game we've seen it in a new city. So are there 3 Great Zapfish? Are there more? Are there multiple Great Zapfish? I don't really know. But we also learned that Fry, Shiver, and Big Man did not know that Agents 1 and 2 were actually Callie and Marie. They just thought they were some random people in Alterna, which is kind of funny. And then they kind of geek out and were so excited that they were able to perform with them this entire time. I mean, they literally helped sing their song at the end of the game, so it's kind of weird that they didn't know this. I mean, they're not even really in disguise or anything, especially if they're big fans. They just kind of blew it. Good job, Deep Cut. With Mr. Grizz destroyed in space, it raises a lot of questions where they're going to go with the future stories and even the big expansive DLC that apparently that we're getting. You know, is Mr. Grizz still somehow alive? Is there other bear subjects out there somewhere? What happens with Salmon Run now? Is this the last game that we're going to have Salmon Run, or is it going to change to something else next game? Are we going to be hunting sharks or something different? Because what's the point of working for this corporation? There's no Mr. Grizz anymore, and why would we keep killing these salmonid? Apparently, they're not the problem. It was Mr. Grizz this entire time. It's very interesting that we're going to continue playing Salmon Run after beating the campaign, because it just makes us look like the bad guys now. This was one amazing story, and I can't wait to go over the other Alterna logs that were talked about, and you know, how they kind of discussed the Inkling life and the rest of the Earth, and I want to go over the Sunken Sea Scrolls as well and talk about any information that was in there. So if you're excited about more lore and more information about this game, and if you found something that I missed, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and comment them down below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and like always, I'll see you all on the next one. See you guys.